Let me bring in now Candace Owens, who we welcome to Spectator TV. She's a conservative commentator, author of Blackout, founder of Blexit. It's an organization urging Black Americans to stop voting Democrat, which they do in huge numbers. You might know from her days as the communications director of Turning Point. Candace Owens, welcome to Spectator TV. Is it not time now for Mr. Trump to concede and move on?
No, and I strongly disagree with Freddie's assessment that the American people want this election to be over with. It's quite the opposite. You had 73 million people voting for Donald J. Trump, and all of these people right now are being gaslit by the media. There was once upon a time where the media would tell the people's story, right? So right now we've just had the media telling their own version of events, not speaking to any Americans who are presenting tons of evidence. They send it to me of their own ballots not being cast, not being counted. People showing you that their dead relatives have voted in this election. This was one of the most insane elections that we've ever had. Mind you, the media, the very same media who prepped us all year saying that this election, we're not going to figure out the results. It's going to be unlike any election we've ever had because of COVID-19 and mail-in ballots. It's going to take weeks and weeks and weeks for us to be able to count. Now, that same exact media is saying, well, never mind, Trump just needs to concede. And we had an election where we all went to bed at 2 a.m. Trump was winning by a lot. And then suddenly we woke up and we were told that the exact opposite had happened. They stopped counting and suddenly there was a massive dump of ballots and Joe Biden was in the lead. Everything about this feels fraudulent. And to say you should just certify the election because the media is ready to move on, which is what we're really getting at. The media is ready to move on. The media hasn't been ready to move on from Trump, honestly, since he won in 2016.
Right.
It's wrong.
But you call the election fraudulent and talk about the media. But even Donald Trump's own lawyers in key states are not alleging fraud. In Arizona, in Pennsylvania, his own lawyers have said, we're not alleging fraud. So it's not just the media. The fact is, you haven't got the evidence to show fraud on any kind of great scale.
Which of Trump's lawyers, because you're making that statement.
All right, I'll give you two. His lawyer in Arizona, when asked by the judge, said, we are not alleging fraud or the stealing of the election. We're talking about, quote, good faith or errors. That's Donald Trump's lawyer. Or in the case in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, the judge asked the lawyer, are you alleging fraud here? No, we are not alleging fraud.
Okay, so the error. Okay, if we're talking about the word fraud and you're reducing it down to the word fraud, what we have realized is that these errors that seem to be happening, these accidental errors where they transfer votes from Trump to Joe Biden only seem to be happening one way. So whether you want to say it was human error, which is what the Dominion Voting Systems is arguing at this point in America, that it was all human error and something happened and someone pressed the wrong button, fine. But the results are fraudulent to the American people. You cannot just move on when 73 million people do not trust the election process and do not trust the votes. And it was done in a year where you transformed the election process. You guys don't do this in the UK. You guys don't calculate and do an electronic system. They don't do this in Canada. They forced this. No. They forced this in America because of COVID-19. And if you go back and look at my rhetoric,
but you're the one that used the word fraudulent.
Yes,
I gave you two examples. I mean, fraudulent and fraud mean the same thing. I gave you two examples of his own lawyers not alleging fraud in two key states.
Yes.
Where did the Dominion voting machine, what evidence is presented that that's made a difference?
Well, I'm not Sidney Powell, so you're speaking to me as if I'm not the person who presented Dominion voting systems as an issue or an error.
You raised it, Candace. You raised
it. In Michigan, I'm saying that the votes were changed. 6,000 people who voted for Donald J. Trump got changed to Joe Biden. So that happened in America, and they've come out and they said that was a human who pressed the wrong button.
Are you talking about Antrim County in Michigan?
I'm not sure. It could be Antrim County, yes, correct?
But what happened was that the original report in Antrim County was wrong. These votes hadn't been moved. It was the report of the voting that was wrong, not the voting machine that was right. And it was right.
No, that was Dominion Voting Systems. That was their argument. But the other people are saying that it was the Dominion Voting System is saying it was a human error, and Sidney Powell and Trump's campaign is saying it was not a human error, that the system was designed to be able to do this. And this is what he's talking about when Sidney Powell is saying that they have more evidence that they're willing to present. Right. And rather than allow them and afford them the right to do this, the entire mainstream media is saying, just move on. It's not here. Why not just allow them? This is what our system allows for. Allow the due process to go through. Why are we trying to sweep this under the rug and move on and say, well, we don't have any evidence yet, so it needs to be closed. Again, this is the same media that told us this election was going to take months and months and months to count, including Joe Biden himself. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton boldly said that Joe Biden, if he lost, should not concede. So I don't understand how the media can then just flip and say, you know what, the exact opposite, and gaslight all of the American people who they've been conditioning to believe that this election was going to take months to transform. I mean, to call.
Okay, I want to move on, but I don't. It's not a question. I would just say before we do of sweeping things under the carpet. It's a question of looking very carefully at all the evidence people who take your side present, and then discovering that in most cases it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. That doesn't mean sweeping it under the carpet. But indulge me, let's assume that I'm right, that at some stage Mr. Trump does have to concede Joe Biden is the next president, the 46th president of the United States. Will Donald Trump run again, do you think?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would hope he would run again. I mean, I don't think that any person, this is going to be a bad election result no matter what, because as you're seeing in recent polling, there are 73 million people who do not believe that this election was executed in good faith. And we have been saying this since long before the election. I've been saying this since March. The idea of transforming the entire election system in 1 year and expecting states to be able to do with this, and having so many people's voices censored, right? People that are speaking out about their own election fraud stories are right now being censored by the big tech. I just don't think it's going to be a very testy time in America, and it already has been for the last 4 years. So perhaps he will run. If he did, obviously, I would support him. I think he should. But it's wrong. And I'll tell you what is fraudulent is all of the mainstream media and the tech people calling President Biden, calling former Vice President Biden the president-elect. That is incorrect. Right. It is wrong language. He should be called a presidential candidate. This election has not been called by the states. Okay,
let's try and keep on track here because I haven't got too much time. Mark our card and on this now. Let's again assume Mr. Trump doesn't run. I mean, I perfectly understand he may well, but let's assume he doesn't. Tell us, what will the battle for the soul of the GOP be like?
It's going to have to stick with what's been dubbed as Trumpism. The GOP has completely changed. It's no longer the establishment Republican Party. And when I say that, I'm talking about the John McCain Republican Party. It's completely transformed over the last 4 years for the better. It's become more inclusive, which you can see by looking at the early exit polling numbers. Hispanics largely, I think 36% voted for Donald J. Trump this election. Black women doubled their support for Donald Trump. Black men voted 18% for Trump. So despite all of the rhetoric of trying to smear and libel him as a racist, the party has actually become incredibly more inclusive. And that's in large part because Donald J. Trump was a more cultural figure. And what I mean by that is that he was able to communicate his message in a more effective way, and he felt more attainable to the American people. And I get that he's a boisterous, busty billionaire from New York, but he does, when he speaks to people, he's very much a blue collar and able to relate to them in a different way. And I think that's
just be clear what it is you're saying, because it's interesting what you say. You're saying that even without Mr. Trump, and maybe actually be with Mr. Trump, we don't know, but even without Mr. Trump, the Republican Party will still, to at least a substantial degree, have become and remain a Trumpian party.
Absolutely, without question.
And if that's the case, Candace, who, in the absence of Mr. Trump, perhaps he's gone off to start his own new TV station or whatever it is he wants to do. In the absence of Mr. Trump, what kind of Republicans today do you think best embody these Trumpian values?
There are a lot of different elements of Trump. So if you're talking about just being a person who, doesn't balk when the mainstream media is on their backs, somebody like Ron DeSantis, right? I mean, he has stood firm in the COVID-19. Kristi Noem in South Dakota has stood firm on her policies despite the media creating a pressure campaign against her on COVID-19. What we're really talking about is someone who does not bend to the will of the mainstream media, because the mainstream media does not represent Americans at this moment. And I would even go so far as to say the mainstream media doesn't represent people in the UK as well, right? They completely missed it.
That may be the case, but though I'm interested, you've managed to work the mainstream media into every answer.
I get that you're a part of the mainstream media and it can be offensive, but you have to call it accurately. You right. Understand they just keep misdiagnosing the people that they are supposed to be representing, and rather than
let's see if I can get an answer without the mainstream media being involved. It seems to me, I mean, I know what you want. It's clear what you want, and you're certainly not alone in that even without Mr. Trump, you think that Mr. Trump has transformed the Republican Party. It's a very different party, not just from the old East Coast country club Republican Party, but also even from the Goldwater Reagan West Coast Republican Party as well. And you think he's made a big change there. I understand that, but you will know there are still plenty of people in the Republican Party that see this as their chance, if Mr. Trump departs, to go back to not a country club Republican Party, but maybe a more Reaganite kind of a Republican Party. So there is going to be a battle for the soul of the Republican Party, is there not?
I don't believe so. I think the Republican Party has actually never been more united. And there was definitely a fracturing when he first hit the stage in 2015. And there were many people, the Never Trump parade, and Republicans who did not stand behind him, but all of those Republicans stood behind him this election cycle. So, despite, I won't say mainstream media, but despite depictions, the Republican Party is actually very much together in this moment, and I don't think anybody wants to go backwards.
Let me bring Freddie in, then I'll come back and finish with you, Candace. Freddie, what do you make of what you've heard?
Well, I mean, I hate to be accused of siding with the mainstream media. I've always tried not to.
God, you're at it as well now.
It's just, I've been busted. My closet never Trumpism has been exposed. But I do think it's very interesting about what happens to the Republican Party after Trump. And I do think we have to have this conversation despite the ongoing contestation. I mean, I'm just interested in how much you can withdraw Trump from the scene and still have the movement he created. And I think one of his failings as a leader, and I hope Candace doesn't object too much to this, is that he hasn't established a movement that can work politically. He hasn't taken over Washington in the way that he could have done. He hasn't even taken over the Republican Party in the way that he could have done. And so when he goes, if he goes, you will see this revert to the mean. And I think it will fail. I think the Bush-era Republican Party is destined to fail. But Trump hasn't established a party that can go forward without him. And I wonder whether it can, because one of the reasons Trump is loved, and I agree with Candace, he is really loved, is because of his flaws. It's because of his failings. So a lot of people, when they talk about Trumpism without Trump, they imagine a sort of a Trump-like person, a national populist, who sort of doesn't have his flaws, doesn't send out nasty tweets. But the tweets and the Trump, the element of the Donald, is crucial to Trumpism. I wonder how it can survive. And I would like to put it to Candace that I think the likely way in which it survives is with Donald Trump Jr. running in 2024, perhaps with Candace Owens as his Veep.
Candace?
I agree very much with your assessment, and I would only say that if you look at America just through the lens of the past, people usually need a break from the family. So I don't know that Don Trump Jr. following Donald J. Trump works. But then again, if people feel like they were not vindicated in the 2020 election cycle, maybe it does. But you are correct that it's going to have to be somebody who is a fighter. And at the end of the day, those are the characteristics of Donald J. Trump. He's a fighter. Excuse me, my cat has apparently jumped into this. It is, yeah, I would totally. People have always asked me, am I going to run? Am I going to jump in and throw my hat in the ring? And I always say the same thing Trump said 20 years ago. If I felt that my country needed me and that I had to do it, I would. I have no desires to do it. I don't think it's a fun job. I think it's a sacrifice, and that too many people want to go in for vain reasons when in fact it's an incredibly difficult job to lead a country. That's
a brilliantly political answer.
Yeah. Sounds to me you're definitely running, Candace. You got that answer down to a pat. Listen, we watched this election, the so-called young country. It seemed to be you had to be 75 plus before you were allowed to be a candidate or a candidate succeeded. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, indeed, who were the likely alternatives? Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. I mean, all these people, their combined ages come to about 2.5 million years. Isn't it time for a break? And your party, your Republican Party, and I appreciate you're an insurgent in the Republican Party, but it's too male, pale, and stale as well. You need to reach out and get a lot more voters. You did badly among a lot of the women's vote. You need more ethnic votes. You need to be younger. I mean, I think of all that, and I'm just, who am I? And you need a true believer. If you take the view that the Trumpian way is still the future, you need a true believer. So I think of all that, and I look at you on my Zoom screen here, and I think, who ticks every box? Candace Owen. Just announce you're running today on Spectator TV.
I love that. I love the encouragement. I'm a different kind of person. I've never been one of those people that has a plan. Everyone says to me, what are you going to do in 5 years, 10 years? I'm a big believer that you have plans and God laughs. And,
you know, 4 years.
Well played. Obviously there's a big energy for that, and people really want to see that. But I'm being honest when I say that every time I sit down with my husband and talk about that, I just say, if it comes to that, and I felt that my country needed me, I would do it. But I genuinely do believe that as a sacrifice. I love my life as it is. I get to say what I believe unapologetically, and I live a great life. I'm happily married with a kid on the way. So the idea of sitting down and plotting and planning to become the president of the United States, to me, there's just something about that's incredibly narcissistic, and I don't have that character trait. But if I do announce, I will definitively do it on Spectator TV.
We're going to hold you to that. I mean, everything you say, the more I'm convinced. I mean, even the baby is going to arrive in plenty of time.
Perfect little half black, half white baby, half English, half American. It's going to be great.
Long before you need to start the primary campaign trail. That would be perfect. And you're married to a Brit. And it's about time there was a Brit back in the White House as well. That can only make for an improvement. If you don't do that, we might burn it down again as we did in 1812. So it's all going well. Listen, whether you run or not, I hope you really come back and see us on Spectator TV. We wish you all the best for the coming Christmas season, and good luck with the baby.